Okay, hi everybody. I'm Shey Ramquist. I think I know everybody, but in case you don't know me, I teach 10th and 11th rhetoric here, as well as some European history and some philosophy. And I've been asked today to just talk a little bit about what we're doing when we come back after our break. We're going to be reading a dialogue out of this book called the Meno dialogue. So I wanted to talk with you about two things. The first is, why are we going to read a Platonic dialogue as a school? And the second thing is, how can we read the dialogue to maximize our understanding of the dialogue and to minimize whatever pain and suffering might come along with reading some philosophy? All right, so why should we read Meno? Well, I was struck with one of the reasons that we ought to read Meno, that Platonic dialogue, as I was reading another one of the great works in the Western tradition. This book, Are You My Mother? I was reading it to my 2-year-old Claire, my 6-year-old Jeremy, and in case you have been deprived of this great classic work of literature, it's about a little bird that falls from its nest and goes on a hunt for its mother. And there's this page that I read every time and makes me choke up a little bit as a dad. The bird is hunting for his mother, and he says, he did not know what his mother looked like. He went right by her. He did not see her. And when you think about it, that's actually a pretty profound question in education and in philosophy. How can we come to know truth if we don't know what that truth looks like already? How will we know when we've bumped into it? And when I was thinking about that, it reminded me of a really important question that comes up in the Meno dialogue, which is, what is virtue? Something that I love about our school is that our mission is not simply to cram our students with facts. Our mission has to do with producing young men and women of wisdom, virtue, purpose, and courage. And if we're going to do that, and specifically if we're going to help teach our students about virtue, what is virtue? What is this thing that we are promising to produce in our students? Along with that question, is the virtue that we're trying to teach the same for all of our students, or is it different? Are there different types of virtue out there that we need to be producing? And what's the relationship between teaching about virtue and teaching ideas and actually developing virtue? Is virtue just something like you get enough of the right beliefs in your head and suddenly you become virtuous? Are there practices that we need to be doing to become virtuous? And ultimately, can we actually teach virtue? If so, how? All those questions are things that come up in the dialogue of the Meno. They're all things that Plato asks us to think about. And I think that's one of the big reasons that we want to read this dialogue together, is to think as a school, what are we doing when we say that we are going to produce young men and women of virtue? So if that's a conversation worth having, and we think it is, how can we read this dialogue with any sort of profit over the break? I want to give you guys 3 pieces of advice. The first piece of advice as we begin to read the Meno dialogue is, don't get intimidated. This is one of the shortest and simplest Platonic dialogues. Let me show you exactly how short it is. It's just 35 pages long. Let's see, it's from here to here. That's it. Not that much at all. We give this to our 8th graders, and we expect them to read it, and they do, and they understand it, so you guys can understand it as well. And the vocabulary in here is going to be pretty simple as well. Now, the actual concepts behind the vocabulary is fairly complex. So when you hit that complexity, again, don't get intimidated. Plato is a weird kind of author in that he really wants you to wrestle with him, to argue with him. And one of the big points of the Meno dialogue is what can happen to your soul if you embrace complexity, you don't give up, you struggle, you wrestle, and then you come through on the other side. Also, Plato's a weird kind of author because sometimes when he has something really important that he wants to tell people, he will do his best to make you give up in frustration and put the book down. So just so you know, you will be reading this dialogue, and I guarantee you'll be just ready to throw that book down, whatever it takes. don't stop. If it means just flipping the page, skipping some sections, don't give up, or else Plato will win. All right? So don't let him win. Work through whatever it takes. Keep on going. Don't get intimidated. Number two. Sorry. One word of warning. If you are someone who loves geometry and geometrical proofs, you are in luck. There is a really wonderfully complicated geometrical proof that you can work through with some of the characters in this dialogue. If not, then that's one of those places where Plato might be trying to get you to put the book down before he tells you something really, really important. All right, so just a heads up on that point. All right, so tip number one was don't get intimidated. Tip number two is when you're going to read through it actually pretty quickly the first time. Have a highlighter in hand or a pencil, go at a pretty good clip, and underline or highlight the good stuff. Things that you think, oh, there might be something interesting or helpful here. Don't get bogged down. Just keep on going, go to the end, and then maybe go back and look through those more interesting passages, the ones that you highlighted. That'll help you finish and not get tripped up with any of the complexity. It's about 35 pages long, as I mentioned, so it takes you about maybe an hour to read, maybe about 2 hours. You should budget about that much. Don't let it take you any longer unless you really fall in love with some of the ideas and really want to sit with it. Okay, finally, tip number three, we'll be sending you some resources for reading this. We'll be sending you some outlines, some summaries. I'll send you a cool GIF animation of that geometrical figure being put together so you can look at that. So use those resources and keep in mind that the point of reading this is not comprehending it on your own. The point is setting us up for a really important conversation that we want to have together as a school. That conversation about how we can be helping people from TK all the way up to seniors understand what virtue is and how they can acquire it. And even for ourselves, how we can learn what virtue is and acquire it. So I look forward to talking with you guys when we come back from break about can virtue be taught. Thanks for your time.